Today's open mic day. I mean, anybody can talk about anything that's even loosely FileMaker or programming related. It sounds like we've already been talking about things like ChatGPT and the Berlin .FMP conference. And so we'll probably start off with that. Vince, you want to start us off?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Steve. And thanks everyone for joining. Yes, I was in Berlin last Wednesday evening. We started at the beer garden, and Egbert's, organization of this event is now the 10th year, but the 11th conference, I believe, something like that, right? But anyway, it's a decade for sure, and it's in a kind of a different location, and it's a central location, and it was really nice to get to see people in person and chat about things of the day. And we'll get to things of the day pretty quick here, but anyway, so there's 3 days. I believe it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and so we had a kind of a welcome from Egbert, and then we also had sponsorship from Claris. Douglas Wallace was there from Claris, and Douglas presented as well on the first day. So the first day got off to, I would say, kind of like a slow start. We had 2 tracks, so two different rooms, kind of across the hall from each other, so to speak.
So what is there supposed to be a difference between blue pill and red pill, or are they just locations in the meeting area?
The one room is slightly bigger than the other room. That's the only difference. But
okay, so the pill is a room.
Yeah, the pill is a room. It's just the name of the room. Obviously, a play on Matrix theme or whatever you want to call it. So, and whistleblower. I didn't go to that session. I don't know, Ben, if you went to that session, but that one was done by someone who I think we all remember, and that is Peter Wagemans. He used to build a tool that was kind of like a snippet tool, and I forget the name of the tool. Does anybody remember?
Clip Manager?
Yeah, Clip Manager. Yeah. And so he was the author of Clip Manager, and he's got this other thing he's been working on. Again, I didn't go to the session, but it's dealing with logs and things like that. So he had that session on that side, and it's nice to see him kind of pop back into the community. I haven't seen him for a while. And then on the blue pill side, we kind of got started with new features of the platform hosted by Fabrice from One More Thing, and just kind of going over some of the the new features that were introduced in FileMaker 2023. And I never quite remember now if I should be saying FileMaker 20 or FileMaker 2023. So anyway,
yeah, it's confusing.
Both are allowed.
And then when 2023 gets here, no wait, it is 23. Yeah, well, when version 23 gets here.
Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of like a very quick overview of the new features, but I think we did a better job at DIGFM when we had Matt last month, who went into not just the new features, but the whole history of 19.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So that was awesome. So if any of you here who haven't seen it, or any of you who watch this recording, I greatly encourage you to watch the last month's meeting of DIGFM. Matt had a great presentation on that. We had some great discussion on there too. Ben, did you want to add anything to this first session?
No, not the first session. I didn't go to Whistleblower either because I'm trying not to deal with servers and have other people do that. But I bet it was good. So I was in there with you. Yeah, and it was, the first sessions, yeah, it was fine. I already kind of knew that. So yeah.
Yeah, and then we kind of got some presentation from Douglas, and it was kind of how would you say? Um, mm, some of the new features it kind of followed through, but um, hinting at some changes that are coming, but we didn't quite get the details of like what's necessarily coming, but that things are maybe getting simplified. That's as much as I could read the tea leaves, so to speak. But so that was just a follow up from Fabrice. Anything to add, Ben? Did you see it differently?
No, because I left then to go to the other room. So I missed the future, Clarice. I thought you'd tell me, and you didn't seem that. You kind of like, yeah, you didn't sort of get a lot from it. So I was after the first bit, but I went to an interesting session, which was data-driven scripting in the red pill.
Oh yeah,
Jan. So I could talk about that if anyone's interested.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So yeah, if you bring that up, that's good. Jan is from he's from what's the name of the company again? Belgian up there, and yeah, he's a really good presenter, and it was a really good session. And basically, what it is it's that problem. He had some nice graphics. The keynote's actually on there with the dispatcher files. So his specific use case for this technique, and he actually had two different versions, and I'll get to what it was in a second, but was the specific ones, the problem of when you have his script is calling messages. So there are a lot of notifications, and they can be different types of notifications. You might send out an SMS or an email or a graph or all kinds of things. And it's an ever-growing list of notifications. So it's this one master script. It's got to send out a notification. And it ends up as this big long if, else if, else if, else if, depending on what's coming in and what kind of notification you want to send out. And that was his problem that he wanted to solve. And so he calls that the evil dispatcher script. And I'm sure probably everyone knows that kind of script. And his problem with it was just it's often very unreadable, especially if you're a new developer coming to it. You're looking at this script and you have to go down all these rabbit holes to find out what's going on until you get to what it is you need to get to. So he's using script IDs. So it's not in itself a new idea, not for me. I guess other people know it. But grab the script ID and then have a table. This was an interesting thing. I haven't done it like that. So he has a table with the script names and the script IDs. And I think the script ID is a calculation. You put in the script name and it calculates the script ID. So you can query that table. So really, your script is sort of just one line. Your instead of the dispatcher script, a central script goes, knowing what kind of notification it queries what script to run and then runs that script. So we had a nice sort of graphic showing how that works. And there's pros and cons, which he was aware of, and it was an interesting discussion. And he also he just mentioned this briefly, and I talked to him about it afterwards. He has a really nice menu system, and that's using like layout IDs, I think, as well. So it was that way of doing things, which some people will like and some won't, but storing IDs in a table, referring to those, and it sort of abstracts things. Yeah, that was it.
So you think it might be interesting downloading this stuff and taking a look at it, huh?
Yeah, his file's nice and clear, and also the keynote. He's a really good presenter. So I'd say it's worth looking at. Yeah. The biggest, I think that the only really big con, as it were, against it was that he said this technique is a little bit opaque to like DDR tools, like Inspector Pro. because you don't see sort of broken references because it just doesn't show up. So that's something to be aware of. But apart from that, it definitely has use cases. And I'll just add for Jan's sake that in that file, because this was something that was discussed in the session, he's using the record ID. So it's just it looks like a serial number. It's not actually. The record ID is also the script ID. And we all kind of agreed, and he agreed, yeah, he'll probably change that so that the script ID will actually have its own column, its own field, rather than using but that was a minor point, really.
By the way, as we're talking about these different presenters, there's some really outstanding ones who you think will willing to stay up past midnight and speak with us. We could try to recruit them here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then after that, there are two sessions that we're running. The data-driven scripting session, and then the Notion. How many people here have heard or used Notion? How many people like Notion?
Searching on the internet right now.
Oh, I've never seen it. Okay. It's I don't know how you would describe Notion. I mean, it's kind of really open-ended, and it's very, very flexible. And that's the thing, I guess, that kind of when Leslie was presenting it, she's also from One More Thing, and it was two people presenting. It was her and I forget the name of the other fellow from One More Thing. He was co-presenting. He did most of the presenting in the end, and she did very little, which I found odd. But anyway, and they were talking about how they were using it for project management, and how they were using it also to build test cases. And I'm like thinking, wow, like if you can't automate it, it's something that's really, really going to be hard to maintain. It's not sustainable. It's not going to go far very quickly. And so that was a major concern for me. Like if you're building test cases where you set the outcome of what your outcome is and all this, and then you have to go manually in and test it and then evaluate if you got that outcome. That is a dead end, in my opinion. And unfortunately, we don't have good testing tools like web developers have. And I don't know if anybody here does test-driven development in FileMaker, but it's really hard nut to crack. Anyway, so it's very loose, but the idea in the end was build some kind of templates that you can then use those templates so that you have some formal structure and use that. But I really don't see how valuable it would be for doing the testing side of things.
How do you get Notion?
What's that?
Is it like a software that you download? What is it?
Well, they have a desktop app too, and it's you could go to their website. I forget if it's Notion.io, I guess it is, and Notion.so. Notion.so. So, Eric, you're looking at your screen, right? If you open up a browser window, and here I'll type in the URL for people here in the chat. Put that in the right place. Yeah. So if you go on YouTube, you'll see a bunch of people have videos that talk about it. It's a little bit like Quip, where if you've ever used Quip, it's that this kind of at and slash method of putting in blocks and saying, I wanna, a Kanban view here, and then you can put that Kanban view object in. But it's again, it's very cool. Uh, it'll be interesting to see how this evolves. And in a sense, like if you had a subscription to this, and if you wanted to put uh, a page, I haven't experimented much with this, but you could embed it directly into a web viewer in FileMaker, and you'd have like a JavaScript object or web viewer object embedded within your FileMaker solution, and then its backend is here. But anyway, um, so it's very interesting. It's worth listening to some YouTube presentations about Notion. If you've never seen it before, I think it's worth taking a look. Anybody else want to comment on Notion?
Hey, I'll jump in and say something. I was filling out a survey earlier, which I think is open to the public. It had a lot of questions about what you use for project, as I understood the questions, what you use for project management on FileMaker projects. And I answered some because I have an opinion, which is that the best tool for FileMaker project management is FileMaker, like a help ticket system that's FileMaker centric. I do think that there's a place for wikis. I'm not quite sure kind of what types of things Notion does, but wikis are something that are difficult to do in FileMaker, that web cross-linking kind of stuff. So I mean, for every project that we do, we use a ton of help tickets because we use the get functions to discern from where the issue is, whether it's a feature request or a bug report or whatever, and then we can go straight back there with a single click. So I'm not a fan of like Jira, except perhaps as a wiki. So anyway, that's one thing. The other thing, Vince, you were talking about test-driven development, and I've been skeptical about that in the FileMaker platform because I think FileMaker sort of is very procedural as opposed to object-oriented, and it's much of a straight line. The closest we've come is like if I have code that I think might, miss a branch or whatever, I'll have it send a help ticket and try and catch it quick with a Slack notification. I know about TDD. I think and this is, I'm just trying to be controversial here. I think it fits more when you're building, more object-oriented code where you make a change here and it potentially has effects in multiple places, where FileMaker seems more of a straight line code to me. But anyway, just some thoughts I'm probably wrong on.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, it is hard. We have been experimenting a little bit with breaking up scripts so that there's kind of an interface component to the script, and then there's like a subscript, and the subscript is the thing that takes the parameters. And if we do it that way, then we can write our tests to call the subscript with the parameter of JSON that we would pass from the interface. And so it kind of it doesn't test the interface thing necessarily, but it tests the function that does the processing of the data. And that seems promising, although we're still kind of exploring it a little bit. And again, this whole point of it is it has to be sustainable. So with the ability to run a bunch of tests on your code before you run a migration, and you have it all sorted out, like that test is supposed to then return this, and you have your testing module look at the output that it returned and then verify that it's correct. And if it passes, it just keeps going. And if anything fails, then, you know, you got to fix it before you migrate. But anyway, I'm
Yeah.
hoping one day we'll have a way to do it.
So Vince, I'm gonna kind of flip around a little bit here and say one of the conversations I had today, and maybe this fits into the same conversation. The conversation was about error trapping, and I went and looked to see the state of the infographics that I have on error trapping. And I would say, and maybe put it out there as a question, I'm not sure that the FileMaker community has like a definitive presentation on how to code in such a way to do error trapping. There's controversy about, whether you turn set error capture on at the top of each script. I'm in the camp where like you leave it off until you know what you're trapping. You like only trap when you know what you're trapping. And we were looking at a situation, some code, just like a simple new record that failed. And it was throwing up a dialogue that wouldn't go away. And we were like, okay, what's the most efficient way to trap this? And, what do we trap and how do we trap it? Can we trap it in one line or do we need 4 lines? So I think that's a very, very interesting topic. And I might have missed a great presentation on it, but I don't think we've had the definitive presentation on error trapping. Or I missed it.
I think Robert did one
No,
recently.
Robert, where's your presentation, Robert?
Good question.
Or how many have you done?
I'm not sure if it was recorded, but if there are other groups where I can present on that topic, I'd be happy to share.
Tony,
okay.
How long would the presentation be?
Eric's ears get burnt up.
Would you be able to send me an email?
years ago, I did a presentation on anti-patterns, and
This is
this is Tom Fitch, and
Oh, Tom. Oh, yeah.
at a pause on air in Portland,
Sorry, David.
I closed the session with that idea that putting error trapping on at the top of your script is an anti-pattern, and boy, that room started buzzing. But I agree with you, Tony. Don't do that.
Yeah. With transactions that we got in 19.6, I felt like, wow, this is really going to open up an interesting opportunity because if your data doesn't get set or your security or data doesn't get set because of validation or security, then it will abort the transaction. And so I think of all these scripts that we as a community have written over the years, where it's like set this field, and then you have get last error, and then check if the error was this, then do that, and then you forget what you're doing. What was I doing? Oh yeah, set this field, and then get last error, and then go to this et cetera, go to this layout. Oh, get last error. I mean, it's just like, to me, I'm already distracted enough. And so if I look at code that's written like that, I can't see the forest for the trees, or whatever, the trees for the forest. I can't understand the code because it's just too interrupted for me. And so I was hopeful that transactions would give this kind of resolve of like, okay, well, if you only care about data integrity, and you have other ways to verify that you're doing pre-flight validation or whatever, and then your transaction is going to work because all your validations are in place, and then you're looking at code that reads like, set this field, go to this layout, do this thing. And you can, like, again, we're so used to the procedural aspect of FileMaker that it keeps you in the rhythm of like understanding what the code is doing, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And that's really important. And if anything fails, then the transaction aborts. But
That's so true.
That's
I'll jump in for a sec. This is Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so excited when they started adding that feature, because it resembled largely try catch, which is a pretty common
Yeah.
construct in some other languages. And you know, even try catch is a little debated. Like different languages have different opinions about whether exceptions are a good idea at all. For example, Rust has basically done away with the idea of exceptions in favor of encoding errors as actual types. But if you do have a language that throws exceptions, and I would probably put FileMaker in that camp because it produces these errors out of thin air that you have to pull for, check for them. Yeah, checking for them manually, like we have to do in FileMaker, can get really verbose. So having some construct that either minimizes the size of all the checks, the polling that we have to do, I would say the best we have in terms of that, besides the new transactions, is the single pass loop and then exit loop
Mhm.
if, check for error, encoded as a JSON or whatever you like. Or with the new transactions, being able to have that flow structure that spits you out the other end automatically. Yeah, it's a really nice thing. I actually, when they were working on that feature in ETS, I put together like a little like visual of what transactions look like today versus I had like a different proposal. I was kind of proposing lean even farther into try catch, but um, nonetheless, you can kind of mimic it with the transactions. So I can post that in the chat.
Yeah, that would be great.
Interesting.
And I think they haven't given up on try catch, Josh. I think that might still be something that will come. And it's just like from my understanding of what they were saying, it's it's something that needs to be done differently than what they did for transactions
Hmm.
to get it right. So anyway, but I think yeah, it would be great to have both.
Yeah.
One thing that's come in recently also is the last error location script step. So you're working through your transaction, you do get an error, and then down the bottom you can say, well, hang on, I had an error. Where was it? Okay, it was line 56. I'll go back and find out what that was. So you're not
Yes
having
and no.
to, you're not having to know what it was through the script.
Yeah. So that works almost all the time, but not all the time. Because there are some situations where the validation only happens when you try to commit the record. And so when it gets down to the commit and it's trying to commit it and you have a unique validation, the validation was for that field, it failed. But when you're at the commit level, if you say get last error location, it won't know that it's that field that's the one that threw the error because it happens at the commit level. So it's a little subtlety.
Yeah, but you're talking about field level validation, which is always hard to
Yeah,
track down anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you have a field, however, that is required to be number, it doesn't need to be committed to validate it. So that if it's not a number, it will take you to the commit step. And then if you say get last error location, it will tell you like it's this field that failed because of the validation. So at this step, right? So in some cases, it does point you to the right place. And in other cases, it doesn't. So yeah.
I have a question on that. I saw my coding partner showed me an error, which was a FileMaker error, you know, like an untrapped error. And it said set field did not work. And we, by default, our inclination is to build a lot of scripts out of the, you know, for starters, we'll build them without the error trapping. And we'll build them initially without the set error capture at the top. And like I said before, only trap specific things, not like trap everything. Like Vince, to your point, I've seen things where like everything is trapped and I find them hard to read. I don't know if FileMaker Incorporated Claris International added like into the generic message, like set field failed and here's the line number. That'd be kind of cool.
you can do it though now
By trapping it.
get last error location.
No, yeah, absolutely. You can totally do it. You can get it. I'm just saying,
Oh, it would be nice.
if you get it, if you go to the work of, and we actually had a big discussion of like, okay, so we want to air trap, right? Because we want to use the features, the get last error, but we were counting how many lines. For this script, we have to at a minimum, we have to, we do have a policy of like, if you're going to do error capture on and off, balance it in the scripts, like have an even number of on and off so that when you're looking at any script, you know what the heck is going on in that script. That's like one idea people might want to debate. But we were like, it's a minimum of one line. And the other thing, just picking up on something that Josh said, was the single pass loop, which is very, very interesting. One thing that I think is interesting about FileMaker as a language is it seems to have a commingling of script steps, some of which are navigational, some of which have user interface changes. So like you might have an error at the top of a script where if you just fail and halt, you're where you started, so it's not confusing. You might have another script where like you go from one layer to another and the error, in which case you might want to go back to where you were. So I think FileMaker's kind of got its own unique challenges compared to other languages because of the commingling of logic and user interface. And I could be wrong because I don't know nothing about Rust.
Oh, that's definitely right. I think there's kind of a open shut principle that I often try to follow when scripting, which is restore the context and the state of the system that you were in at the beginning of the script, at the end of the script. And that really, it's much easier to do if your script has a single exit point at the end as well, because then you can have a series of cleanup steps that compare something that you might store, say, error capture state at the beginning of the script. And then at the end of the script, whether or not an error occurred, you can still have a chance to restore the error capture state to what it was before. And same thing with the layout you were on and possibly the record open state if you need to revert something that you started editing records. So it's like a script flow question. I find the single pass loop or a similar construct really helpful in that regard because it spits you out of the single pass loop and now you have the opportunity to review what the state is an error set, take appropriate action, and hopefully exit the script, putting everything back where it was when you started.
Yeah,
It's a challenge.
I would say if you were, what would you say, Josh, if you just spawn an off-screen window and do all there, and then if it succeeds, you close the window and you give a message to the user it succeeded. If it didn't succeed, then you close the window and give the user a message it didn't succeed. But you never have to worry about state because you left things as you were before you went to do the work. Or similarly, and as an adjunct to that, what if you run it on server? I just would like your comments on that.
I think server's a really interesting one because it doesn't modify the client state, but even opening a new window, I would say that's a modification to the user's environment. So if you abort a script halfway through and you have a separate window open off screen, and I've made bugs this way before where the screen remains open or the other window remains open, especially if it's a card window and that's locking the window behind it. The user can be stuck. They can't even necessarily click. So you have to perform similar cleanup actions. So in that specific case, what I'll often do is you open a new window. If that succeeds, I'll save new window open true as a variable. Continue on with my script flow, single pass loop. Everything's happening in a new window at this point. And at any point, if I close that window, I set new window open to false. Or if I get spit out early before I have a chance to close it properly after, say, the transaction completes, and now I'm outside the single pass loop, you say, okay, is there an error set? Yes, there is. Let's check, is new window open? New window open. Is it true? Oh, we better close that before we spit the user back out of the script. So even so, yeah, you can protect your current window state a little bit and all your tabs and all the stuff that you would have on your current layout, that would remain put, but you still have some not context, but environment changes that have happened in the midst of that script that need to be addressed. So I think it's part of the same story. I don't think it's super unique. Perform script on server is really interesting. I mean, if there's no implicit commit, you can leverage that supposedly. So, you don't have to do a revert record manually at the end of the script. You might have a couple extra tools at your disposal with PSOS, but I think it's largely the same. Like you want to be aware of every error that can happen that matters to people. So if anything bad happens on the server, I just find it easier to error trap and take appropriate action just as I would in a client-side script. I don't know if anyone else does it differently. I'm sure there's a million ways to do it, but it's what we've settled on.
Cool.
Jump in.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, can I just instant what Josh was saying about the and Vince, opening a new window, and there's something since I joined Beeswax and the project I'm working on there kind of had this built in, is when we're opening a new window, I've found this in someone else's script. So I was like, oh, that works. So there's a single loop, might want to open a new window to do stuff off screen. And just use a UUID name, a UUID, give that window name, get UUID, call that window that. Then at the end of the loop, you kind of don't need to know if a window's open or not, because you just close that window by the UUID, which you set. It's kind of similar thing because it's saved in a variable. So you can just close it because that doesn't cause an error, whether it's open or not. And the other one is just because this happened to me, web direct, and if it's starting from a card window, you have to close that card window, open the new window, and then quite possibly restore the card window back to the state. So it's like kind of.
That's such a good example too, because and this kind of ties back to what Tony was saying, should we error trap everything or not? And I've mostly settled on yes, especially as the system grows bigger and bigger, because things are, whether we like them or not, interconnected. So you might down the road change user permissions, or you might change the triggers on a layout. And if you don't have appropriate detection for things that could go wrong, you might switch to using a card window when that feature comes out from using a different kind of window. And if you don't check for an error, for example, after new window, even new window, something as innocuous as that, the inability to do that over another card window in WebDirect could result in problems for the user. Whereas if you had coded really defensively in the first place, you would have an error in your log. You could go address it before you even get the call. And okay, we need to do a different type of thing. That the parent window has to be a non-card in this particular workflow now if we're supporting WebDirect or whatever. So really defensive coding actually in the long term saves time. It makes your scripts twice as long. That's like something that could really be improved in FileMaker scripting for sure. And I think transactions are a good step in that direction. But yeah, especially building bigger and bigger systems, just almost everything deserves error trapping. Even if just for the introspection that you get from logging that type of stuff, and you get a really good picture of your system, and often you can get stuff fixed before you even get the bug phone calls or the tickets or whatever. You're not even using Jira at that point. You're just, you're looking at the log and getting emails if you want. So yeah, I agree with you.
So one of the challenges, and I think it's a good debate because we're hearing both sides. Vince is like, the script is really long, and Josh is like, a long script is okay. So it's a good, healthy debate. I'll continue to participate. One of the things that I think would be really useful is there's all these script steps, and the documentation in FileMaker is great. Could be even better if we knew what things could go wrong. Because I don't, like somebody knows, right? And I don't. So I don't know. So partly because I want to learn, I'm inclined to like not trap, because then I discover over time what can happen. And the conversation today was like, someone with a low-level privilege did a new record, which failed. And then it was like a dialogue that was like, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. And it didn't even go away. So, and that was pretty catastrophic. So we're like, okay, let's trap that system wide. And that once again got into the debate of like how much extra code we're going to have to add to do it. So let me just say one thing that's useful is we do a lot of fail early, and that makes everything a little bit easier. Like first thing we'll do at the top of a script, generally speaking, is, unless we're in a portal, commit the record. Make sure we're in the browse mode, make sure the found set's greater than 0. Just a whole stack of things. Make sure that all the object names that we're expecting to encounter later in the script are there. So by getting that all done at the beginning of the script, the rest of the script, which is more complicated, is simpler. But anyway, a lot of good ideas, and that's my 2 cents. Fail early, but not.
I want to add one more. Thanks, Tony. I want to add one more thing to this discussion, and that is in FileMaker 20, they added the script error logging on the server, right? So we had this ability to log on client, but now you have it on the server. And I still I wish that there was one place you could turn on logging for all clients, and if an error happened anywhere, it would write a log to the server, like an entry to the server. So if I'm running a script locally and I have a step that's running in FileMaker Pro, not on the server, on FileMaker Pro, that throws an error, it would send that error to the server and log it. And so then, whether it runs in FileMaker Pro or on PSOS or OData or Data API or WebDirect, it all goes in one place. And then if you had users comprehensively test the system and they know what they're testing, you could just look at that log and say, hey, everything's running, under all privileges and everything. I mean, if you could automate it, it would be even better. But I would greatly prefer that, because then if you found a way to run automated tests, then you run a whole batch of tests. And then if anything shows up in your log, you've got an error to look at. I don't know if anybody feels the same way about it, but.
Yeah, so Vince, are you saying that you don't want to have get last error and then run a subscript that writes a log record and then goes back and continues the script? Do you have some problem with that?
No, I like the fact that I like code to be almost as readable as pseudocode.
Mm-hmm.
If it could be equal to pseudocode, it would be a dream, because then I could just grok at it almost like in a page, and I can see what it's doing. And then it's like, okay, that's clear to me. I understand what it's doing. Of course, adding notes would be in comments would be really useful and that kind of thing. But what we have right now to deal with errors is so frustrating. I mean, write a file out to the drive and then write your errors to that, and then you have to collect those errors and send them to the server if you want them all to be in one place, like in one table. And then the same thing on the server, you've got the log that you can write errors if there's errors that run on the PSOS side. It's so convoluted. I wish they would just turn on one setting, and even for the extra overhead for each client to send, like, let's say you get like step after step after step, like in Tony's case where security's not right, and you got like 10 set fields one after another, and it takes time to send each one of those calls to the server. I don't care. It's in debug mode. That's the whole purpose of it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it's going to make the user's experience slower. I have this valuable information that I need to know where the errors are on client, on pro, and at all places. And
how do you feel about a more like this is a paradigm shift for FileMaker, but I kind of envision it almost like a mode, like a take off, like fail fast mode or something, fail on error mode. And if a set field fails, if it behaves like it does in a transaction by default, if maybe there's a mode you can turn on, that would be more similar to like JavaScript, where if some code you have fails, it throws an exception and you have to do exception handling. It spits you out of whatever scope you're in into the next scope, and it bubbles errors up automatically. FileMaker doesn't do that. It fails silently, and you have to manually pull, which makes our scripts twice as long if you want to do the equivalent of what you would get in JavaScript, for example. In FileMaker, it takes twice as much code, which is pretty funny for a low-code platform. In the link I posted, it shows one example with error trapping and one example with an equivalent try-catch, and it's just about half as long. So I think there's a couple things at play. There's logging and error visibility, which is really important. And then there's also error handling, which is also really important. That's for the safety and correctness of your program in the first place. So I think that even if you could test your system and you could still have to maintain this sort of like fail silently thing if you had really robust tests, but it could also be really useful to have a system whereby we let it fail when it's incorrect. And then we have proper script flow tools for handling those errors more succinctly. Because I agree with you, and it's really hard to read, especially when every single error is actually longer than the script step itself. New record is 2 words, and then the exit loop if, just the script step name itself is longer than new record. And then to write out the logic inside the exit loop if after each one makes it much longer. So there's more error handling code than there is business logic in scripts right now. And I look at that as like a really painful pain point in FileMaker, at least in my experience.
Totally agree.
Robust stuff.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So not to get on a downer. Let's see where we are in terms of, I don't know if we've exhausted that topic or anything else to
I think we covered it pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So, so moving on day one, we had a presentation by Jeroen, and I always like pronouncing his name because it just makes me think of your room. Great speaker, and basically, talking about successful project management. Not a technical talk, but I invite you to download his slides. I think he posted a PDF of his slides. Anyway, there's some mention of a book there, The Lazy Project Manager. I haven't read it, but he said it's worthwhile reading. And then there was some other concepts that he talked about. Again, it wasn't a technical talk, more of a kind of an inspirational talk, if you wish. And they actually had to deal with a system with a lot of users, so they had some interesting story. At least last year, had some interesting stories to tell about what they had to do to architect that system with a lot of users. And then again, I pretty much stayed in the blue pill room. The next talk was by Cable Ruth. And I don't know, this talk is such a great, I love his description. It's like, it's all about corruption and the whole, like, description is corrupted. It's so cool. How did he do that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just copying all kinds of strange characters and pasting them, mushing them together. So yeah, it's very cool. And that would, just the fact that he did this attracted me to go to, listen to his talk. We got on the topic of corruption and how it kind of creeps in, but we also, I mentioned there used to be a tool by David McKee. Does anybody remember this tool? A long time ago, David McKee had a tool that could sniff out corruption in your data. Like you would kind of turn it loose somehow and look at the data in this field or in this field, and it could detect if there was corruption. And I don't know what happened to that tool. David McKee is still around. He's still at Claris. I should ask him. But anyway, so that's finding data corruption in your data. but this was also finding data corruption in like anywhere in your schema, on a layout, you know, in your field calculations, in your scripting. Anybody have had to deal with that lately?
Not as much
Not in
lately.
years.
Yeah.
Not in years.
You know, that all said, when it does happen, I think what, you know, so hat tip to FileMaker for like a really remarkably stable platform. You know, that all said. Having said that, I think, you know, maybe 10 years ago I had an issue with a layout object. So I'm kind of curious, because when it does happen, it's a big deal, right? Even if it only happens once every 10 years. There's four
I'm
things.
curious how it goes away too.
What's that?
I'm curious how some of that stuff went away. Like I used to have problems with certain layout objects, and I think
And
I
then
even
they
security
self-healed or
objects.
something?
Yeah, and then it would just like hasn't been bothering me. I had these notes in some places in FileMaker where it's, don't put anything below this script or whatever, because it wouldn't work. So, but that stuff went away.
So Vince, if you were at that presentation, how did he recover? If you remember.
Yeah, so I didn't take good notes on that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and he didn't leave good notes either.
I didn't need to take notes. So did I jump in there, Tony?
Go for
Well, yeah,
it.
I mean, I wasn't there. I was in New York.
No, I was there, sitting next to Vince, and I was taking notes. And it was a good talk. And also because I recently had this problem with a very old file, and it seemed very similar to what Caleb had, which was interesting. And there was an interesting talk about what it might have been. But you know, you have to, I mean, Saline have a really good blog post about this, because he mentioned it and I'd come across it. I could look for it afterwards. But you have to, his solution was going through the classic way to do it. So he didn't have a particularly revolutionary way to do it, but you know, you need to, what is it? You run recovery, you make a copy of the file, run recovery, read through the logs, you know, get rid of the problems, try it again, don't use that file. And it's just a slog. You just have to work through it until you end up with a clean file that you can use. Right. But it was recoverable in his case, and it was in mine. The problem is like it's just one of the things he talked about it is you may not be aware that you have a corrupted file because it doesn't always show up. Yeah. So when you verify it, it doesn't necessarily tell you that your file's corrupted. You have to run this recovery, and I can't remember exactly how he discovered his, but mine was just a file that basically took ages to reopen after you closed it, and that was just suspicious. And Caleb said the same thing. If your file, I can't remember exactly how he noticed it, but if your file's doing something weird, you want to stop and recover it. Then, yeah, doing anything strange, and then go through the standard recovery process, and it may just be work. You just have to work through that. And you know what he had to do was, and what I had to do is, it basically said there's a problem with the layout, so he needed to delete those layouts. But of course, first you want to recreate those layouts, and you don't want to just copy paste everything from your corrupted layout. So you need to rebuild those layouts, repoint scripts to the new layouts, right? So it you know, depending, it can be a bit of work. It was only a couple of layouts in his case, so he just had to, you know, use a DDR tool to find which scripts point to that layout and that kind of thing. Yeah, but there isn't any easy way around it.
Yeah, and he was using the technique of I'm gonna run the recovery, and then I'm gonna drop half of these layouts, and then run the recovery, and kind of trying to find where the place was. And then once he found it,
Yikes.
you know, then he would work on rebuilding that item kind of from the ground up, so to speak.
And Russell Watson did bring up an interesting point, because what it was pointing at actually in the layouts was the table view. It was specific. This layout, there's a problem with the table view. Now, Caleb wasn't using the table view, and I think I had that problem too. And there was a kind of point about, if you can just turn that off. It seemed to be a sort of interesting thing with a layout view that wasn't actually being used. Still,
what was the symptom of the corruption?
So I'm trying to remember do you remember what he had for a symptom, Vince? No, I can't.
I think like what you said, which was slow to open, or was, oh yeah, remember he said, I had this go to this on first window on
That's right.
on opening the file, like go to this layout, and it wasn't going there.
It went to the wrong layout.
Yeah, that's what it was.
The layout IDs were corrupted somehow. Yeah, file opened, startup script, and it went to the wrong layout. And he's like, oh, that's not right. Okay.
Yeah.
So strange behavior. And my case was just a file actually doing migration. So like server automatically closing down, then go to reopen it, and it would take hours to reopen.
Hey, for what it's worth, I spent some time with the late great Winford, who did the FM diff. One DevCon. I think I skipped like 2 sessions just talking with him about file corruption, because I had a client with a file that had been around for like 20 years and had a lot of symptoms and stuff like that. And the 4 things that we do, and I did have one sort of layout corruption thing, which was interesting. I ran the DDR and it would crash. So I did what Vince was talking about, like shuffle the layouts around. And I finally tracked it down. The DDR was crashing. It was out of sync with the layout that it was on. But here's something potentially useful for detecting corruption. We do the recovery, 2 kinds. One on the top level, the block level, another one more diagnostic, where you drill down, if that makes any sense. There's 2 different ways you can run the recovery. Running a DDR can often reveal issues, like if the DDR that is produced is invalid, it might indicate issues with the layout catalog. I've seen that. And then FM diff, if you bought a copy of this, I think it still works on various file formats. And Winfred was amazing. He was the first person I saw who could crack the FileMaker file top to bottom. And Eric, maybe you want to edit that out. But I think he's like the only person on the planet outside of Claris who could do that. Anyway, those are the 4 things that we would do to diagnose corruption. But, knock on wood, haven't had any issues in 10 years. Solid hosting, all the kind of, proper deployment. Don't put your files on Dropbox and open them from there.
And verify once a day at least, right, Tony?
Yeah, do the the verify, and then if there is an issue, run the verify that runs. My understanding is the verify that runs from the, what are those things called, backups, is a top level verify. And if you have an issue with a file, you want to do the verify where you drill down 1 level, and that'll check the internals of the block structure. And there's Stephen Blackwell and Wim did some nice white papers on the block structure. But knock on wood, no problems in 10 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of that might be due to the fact that I remember, and maybe 10 years ago, maybe more, like it was shunned upon to do live development, not live development, meaning you shouldn't be writing or making schema changes on a hosted file. Am I incorrect about that? Was it like not do live development? Right.
That's what I heard.
And then at some point, they, instead of, like, what was happening was, like, if your connection flaked out and you were in the middle of writing an update to a table or something, and then that would be just like cause a complete disaster, and the file would be broken. You couldn't open it, or something would happen to it. But then what they did is, instead of writing directly to the file, they would write to a temporary file on the server. And then once they had written all of that to the server, then that would write to the file. And that would assume that, like, okay, the power is going to be on for like the next 50 milliseconds or whatever it would take to do that operation. And so that it would primarily eradicate the problem that people were encountering sometimes, where they'd have like a script open and then they lost their internet connection, and the script or the layout got broken and caused some havoc.
Well, that makes sense.
That's very
When
cool.
did they make that change?
When did they make that change? I don't remember exactly. We could ask Clay at some point. But yeah, there was that made it more reliable to do live development. Like, yeah.
Very cool.
Oh, all right. So the last, again, I don't have any notes for the other sessions on the red pill side, but this last session by Fabrice was really like his personal pet peeves, if you wish, and he would go through them, and he had some rating system, and from 1 to 5, and assuming it's an easy thing to do, like the assumption which I never really ever try to assume that even something simple for a FileMaker engineer to put into the product, even though it might be like, oh, can't you just make this dialogue bigger or whatever, like I have no idea what's involved. So I never like to assume those things, but he was thinking, well, it's about 60 or some odd ideas that he had, and then he asked for people to rate them, and then people would put up their hands, 5, 4, 3, and oftentimes people would he would overrule it and say, yeah, no, I still think it's a 5. So it's like it was the end of the day.
Sounds like a FileMaker feature fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
anyway, it was the end of the day.
Did he publish this list?
We could ask him to upload his file.
And you're talking about this presentation here that I have right here?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to see, I mean, the 50, 60, whatever, and I hope he gave a copy to the FileMaker engineers.
Yeah. I'll definitely ask him, and in the next meeting I'll maybe an answer by then. So that was day 1, and at this point we're only an hour in.
Yeah, we're only an hour in. I was just going to jump in because Fabrice was funny. And Fabrice said he wanted everyone to give their own ideas too, but he brought 60 to the table. We got to about 49 and everyone went, hang on a minute. So we stopped at 49, and then everyone in the room got a chance to say what they wanted. But it was, the interesting thing for me was it was kind of fun to see what was important to other people, what people care about, what upsets people, so.
Yep.
Sounds like good content for a meeting. That's like a riff point, because for each of the 60, I'm sure there's workarounds for some of them.
Yeah. If we ever do some meeting like that, we invite Clay. We say, okay, here's the list. Okay.
Yeah, there was a
just
couple of people in the room just saying, well, you can do that with the MBS plugin. And they're right. And then other people would say, yeah, but I don't want to use the MBS plugin. But yeah, it was an interesting, lively debate, let's say, before we went off for a beer.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see if it can be done with the MBS plugin. It's a good litmus test to see, that means it's doable. No pressure on the FileMaker engineers, but if you can do it, you can too.
Exactly. All right. So again, that was day 1. We're at an hour. It's very late for me, so I don't know how much energy.
3 look more concentrated even.
2 was the intense day. 2 is the intense day because it got started with a kick-ass presentation by Charles Delphs, and if you we're inviting Charles to an upcoming DIGFM meeting. If you've never seen him present, he's an awesome presenter, and he gave a talk about syncing, and it was just like it's a great talk. So like we're going to try and see if he can talk about this topic specifically because I think it was really, really well done. How he described different syncing challenges and how they approached their solution that they did. And it's very how you say yeah, it's very creative and looks like it would work really well in the real world. So
Now, when he started proposing topics, if he was coming to this meeting, did he even mention this?
this was one of them, I think. Yeah, like he has
Okay.
a bunch of other things, and you know, like in the spirit of .fmp, it's you're not really there to peddle your wares, right? You're not there to say, you know, here's FM better forms, and you know, I want you to buy a copy, whatever. So you're really in the spirit of sharing knowledge, and so so that's why you know, although Charles has got his company and he does FM better forms and he does a great job with that too. He was presenting on this separate topic, and again, I definitely encourage you to check him out if he's going to be speaking at some other group. But we're inviting him to speak in the next month or two, so stay tuned. Okay, now for the fun stuff.
Oh.
So
that
we gotta, yeah, like, okay, so now we get into ChatGPT.
the meeting's done here, right? We're stuck on this.
Yeah, we're gonna spend all night on this one. So Ian Jemison, who has done, does it say his studies? Because he's been studying AI for a while now, doing I guess his master's or something. He went back to school, and it's ironic, or you know, kind of the twist of fate that ChatGPT is really in the crosshairs of his studies and what's happening in the technology world. But he had a lot to say, and
wait a second. So Ian's the presenter, but I see the owner of these files is Chris.
Oh, it's because people can upload things to different sessions. So even though he's a presenter, Chris found an article and uploaded it into the bucket that's for this session. So it's allowed. So yeah, Ian gave a great presentation about what LLMs are, kind of like more the technical side of things, about, you know, how ChatGPT does its magic, it's all this, right? And what's out there, also from an open source point of view, and you know, so like just a lay of the land, really. I don't know, Ben, do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on that because this was a great session. Ian's really clever, nice guy too, and he's been working with this stuff for a while. And what he demonstrated to me, and what I got out of this, Vince, was he talked about ChatGPT because obviously it's very much part of this theme. But it was the following session, and that was, I think, almost planned, was much more specifically about using ChatGPT. And then Ian kind of went back to what he does and what I thought was really interesting, and the real takeaway, apart from the elephant in the room, which we might get to this time, and he never got to it, was what he's been working on, and what he's found is really powerful. And this is what he says is the real future, the thing that's really going to change things. ChatGPT is I sort of opened everybody's minds to this and made us realize we're at this revolutionary point. But the real power comes, and this is the stuff he was doing, was using like these smaller models, like specifically trained in a specific domain. Yeah, so for something specific, LLMs, and they're specifically trained to do whatever it is your business does, right? And the more specific they are, the more powerful they are, and you plug them into your software. And he has been doing this and demonstrated, and you can do this all with open source tools. And I would love to find some time to look into the stuff he was talking about. So I can't explain it to you, but ask Ian. But everyone can learn this yourself, how to harness all these open source free tools, plug into a specific LLM, and really, I mean, really get things going. And it's really going to change the way business is done. Much more. ChatGPT is just general language prediction, but these are, you know, AIs, LLMs, models that are specific to certain businesses, and just keep getting better and over time, and all the various tools and ways that you can harness them. So it was a great talk.
Yeah, that's a great review, Ben. Thank you.
Can I talk about the elephant in the room? Because that was before the recording. I thought we were recording, and then we got carried away. So just sorry if everyone's heard this before, but I'm not sure if everyone was there at the beginning. Ian, I was talking to him the night before in the beer garden, and he said he wanted to talk about the elephant in the room. And as often happens at these things, the discussion went on, and he never brought up the elephant in the room in his discussion, but I talked to him about it, and I thought it was interesting. And his elephant in the room, and he, like I say, he's been working with AI for a while now, working with these LLMs. His elephant in the room is that these things, even ChatGPT is a good example, it's really good at code. It's really good at JavaScript and Python, and I think some other languages too. And just for example, you know, it'll really help you really fast using natural language, you know, build a web-driven app, right? You know, from start to finish, really, and you know, really help you with the coding. It'll basically do most of it for you. And I don't know, just briefly, I don't know if people have seen, there's a demo code from CodePen.io. I might post it in the chat if I find it, where a guy, this is something they're working on with ChatGPT-4, which recognizes images, where a guy draws a little website, hand-drawn, one drawing. It's a little website with a couple of buttons, and you click a button, it tells you a joke. It's nothing that complicated, but this is early days. And he uploads that with Discord to ChatGPT-4, and it builds the website, writes the script. You just copy paste it, bang, you got a working website within seconds, basically. So the elephant in the room from Ian was, if it's that easy to, you know, use these scripting languages and these open source tools to build apps, what do we need a low code platform for in future? Is there going to be a need in future for a low code platform, any low code platform? Obviously, specifically FileMaker for us and at this talk. That's the elephant in the room. And then before Vince and me just carrying on the conversation was, I don't think it gets rid of developers, and I don't think it gets rid of, you know, any of us who work with FileMaker, but our job may change, may be very different in 5 years' time, if Ian's right. Certainly in 10 years' time, but probably even less. So we'll all just become these interpreters, because the clients will still need people to build software to understand their needs and translate that into code and understand what these tools are doing for us. So I think that we're not going to be out of work, but the work might change radically. It might be a problem for a company like Claris. I really don't know. But that was the elephant in the room. And just winding that up, Vince, you had a nice word for it. What do we call, what will those be called, those people, the engineers, the prompt engineers or something?
Prompt engineering, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I was thinking that, you know, just like we're evolving, or we've already evolved, like UI, UX to me is very limiting, because we already have the user experience of voice. So, you know, and that's, you know, UI is like just a screen. I'm looking at a screen and that's it. But I mean, we have voice interaction, we have haptic interaction, we have all kinds of other inputs now, and we're not even getting on a topic of Vision Pro. That's not allowed right now. So hold on. But you know, like with this coming, I'm almost thinking that there's like another phrase to coin, which is something Darren coined, which was I really like, which is not just the user experience, but the developer experience, right? And I would say it would be something akin to assisted experience. So imagine if you would, like I have this helper, this copilot as they have in, I don't know, JavaScript copilot or whatever. You have a copilot that helps you write your code. You have an assistive helper. So anyway, it's really interesting how things are evolving so quickly. And to dovetail off of this session, the next one was by Joris, and Joris, kind of gave a more hands-on session. That's the second one, Eric. Discover the mind-blowing magic of ChatGPT, and so he had a bunch of examples, and I think you can download his PDF file to see the examples that he had, and he showed how the results of those examples that he did. So, do you have it? No, you don't have it. Oh, maybe you're not allowed to download it because you're not a .fmp member. But I wonder if we're okay to share it. I'd have to check with Egbert if there's any concerns. But let me show you my screen because I have something cool I want to show. So where is it? This one here. Okay, so off of what he presented, I went off and I got inspired to do this thing here. So I said, can you help check this FileMaker script and tell me if there are any errors with it? And I love how polite ChatGPT is. Certainly, I'll do my best to help you check your FileMaker script. Please provide me the script you'd like me to review, and I'll assist you with your identifying any errors or potential issues. So I gave it this script, right, in just like written form, not like XML. And the script you provided appears to be basic loop and so on and so forth. I'll let you read it. So take a moment to read it. So it realizes like, okay, maybe you have to maybe like set up some stuff before you get into this loop and all that, but still didn't catch the error because the error is like I'm just setting I'm going through a set of records, setting them all to Bill, whatever, but it won't get to the last record. So it'll exit before it gets, offset of, typical loop error, offset of 1, whatever, So like, okay, I said, make sure, and then it gives you this hint, okay, make sure you replace your layout with the name of your desired layout, right? So your layout over here, right? And so, it doesn't seem to work correctly. When it gets to the last record, can you suggest a fix for this? So I'm kind of giving, like, it's almost, think of it like a junior developer. You're trying to coach them along, right? Apologies for the oversight. I love this banter. To fix this issue, when the script reaches the last record, you can modify the exit loop condition. Instead of comparing get record number with get found count, you should compare get record number with get found count -1. I'm like, no way, you're kidding me. Okay, still not what I'm looking for, right? So this is still like a junior dev, and then I say, no, that is even worse because now the last 2 records don't get updated. So apologies for the confusion. You're right. My previous, think about it. I'm speaking to a friggin' computer. Like, can you believe that? Like,
okay, but what if you gave it the wrong answer? Would it still tell you that you're right?
Well, that's the thing that comes into play for our years of experience, right? So we know that this isn't right, but you have to imagine someone who's just starting and saying, can you write me a script that does this? And like they take it at face value, and it's like, okay, I guess you're the knowledge expert here. I'll just copy it and paste it, and I'll use it, right? But so I just like, to me, it's like, like, okay, apart from the fact that it's wrong, okay, but the fact that it's like I'm conversing with a computer, that is mind blowing to me. Like, and it's still polite. It's not telling me to F off, you know, because it's annoyed that I'm, you know, kind of bugging it. Thank you. That does fix the problem. However, I thought that go to record request had another option that we could have used. You are correct. The go to record request page script has another option. After all that, it finally finds this, what I was looking for, exit after last, right? Which I didn't want to put in there. I wanted to see if it was sneaky enough to find that. So that was my experience, right, with ChatGPT 3. Now this was ChatGPT 4. Check this out. So I fed it the same information, and it said, your script you've written seemed correct for the task of going through each record in your current found set and setting the name field to build. However, there's one subtle problem. Your exit condition for the loop is that the active record number equals the found count. That means your script will not process the last record. It found this out on the first try. That's amazing. That's incredible. Look how many iterations I had to go through in ChatGPT 3 to get it to understand, you know, already this very point. So yeah, so it fixed this on the first try. That blew my mind.
Gave that answer there at the that's the result?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is I fed it the same thing right here. I fed this prompt, the same thing, to ChatGPT 4, and the first reply it gave me was this.
Huh.
Yeah.
I've done that too, Vincent. Yeah, the difference is huge. ChatGPT 4 is way better. Yeah,
and it knows the FileMaker script syntax there.
Yeah, because it's on the internet. On the internet.
Wow.
People talk about it.
Well, it's not connected to the internet, but it learns from it. It knows the MBS plugin too, because I asked it about getting some XML, and it said, "Oh, you could use the MBS plugin for that."
Yeah. Well, I remember the question I asked it about composing a, what was it, like in a regular expression, and it created one for me with this function in it for regular expressions, and I said, and my first thought was like, wait a second, I didn't know FileMaker had a regular expression calculator. and he goes, oh no, you'd have to create a custom function for that. And then I said, well, show it to me, but it actually couldn't do it.
Yeah. So as Joris was commenting on his session that he was giving about these things, he said it's a good bullshit artist.
Mm-hmm.
But Vince, he did get it to do a custom function, didn't he? And it did. Yeah. There was an interesting one too, which I can't show it, but I thought this was a good one, Vince. Was it came up with a script or an answer function, and it invented a get function, didn't it? It was like get window. It was up on the screen.
Yeah,
and he had a couple of good examples, which Shadi had up a screenshot of. That was one, and we all kind of looked at it, and then it was like, hang on a minute, that's not it, but it looks like a FileMaker function.
Get the right answer.
Yeah, it was like, you know.
There's like 4 window types, and it said there's actually 5.
But like, Vince, isn't ChatGPT 3 sitting next to ChatGPT 4, and you just taught ChatGPT 3 how to do it? And it's reached over and said, hang on, I just learned how to do this. This is the right answer. You know, yeah. What's the learning method of these machines?
I mean,
you know,
when you look at what when you understand what it's based on, what it's doing, it's the prediction of the next word, right? So, and I don't know how complicated the heuristics of all of it is basically understanding how to predict the next word in the phrase, and it, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, Darren, Here's an example. It doesn't learn anything from us. It has its trained models. It doesn't even remember a conversation. So if you have a conversation with it, you start a new conversation, it doesn't, and you've gone through a whole thing, you have to feed in that whole information again.
Oh.
But the point being that the knowledge that ChatGPT 3 is coming from, I think, is from 2021. And then the knowledge from ChatGPT 4, I haven't seen the stats as to where its knowledge is coming from. And so there's not a Google type search where the websites have been crawled to go and get the information. They've captured it and said, right, any of our responses are from this point in time. And so the point in time between 3.5 and 4 can be different. And so someone may have written a blog post about looping through scripts that it's able to access from 4 to 3.5. There's a lot of misinformation about what's going on under the hood, and how it gets that information and how it returns back to you, Vince, between the two. Another good example is to ask it for 3 prompts, put the same question in and give me 3 methods to come back, and it will come back with 3 completely different things each time. There's a lot of black box in this type of stuff at the moment, and we're only just starting to scrape the surface.
Is that Robert No asking?
Yeah, it's just trying to surf on what Ben said about the question of if today someone can build a website by just sketching something, where are we going to be 5 years from now, and so on and so on, and I want to get to a point that overlaps with something that Vince said, but basically I open it with a question, and it's like, if you could ask AI to say build an F1 racing car, okay, and then you would feed the specs into a fully robotized assembly line, so you get the car out, there's no human intervention from A to Z, okay. Would you sit in that car and drive it?
No.
Correct, because I would not either, okay. And yet there's going to be people who will take that stuff and because like it's not about a life or that thing, they're just going to start put things together and they're going to use that until it fails on them. And it's a bit like, people who say, yeah, I don't want to hire an electrician to do that work, and then they start to couple things up together, and then one day either the house burns down or they do hire someone to come in, and then they say, well, who did this, and we have to rip it all out and start fresh. And so basically with AI, the thing is it is a tool, okay, and you still need to know good from bad to be able to use the tool. If you're not able to know good from bad, then using the tool, like if you're more, it's like automation, if you're more performant at outputting something that is crappy, well, getting more bad stuff is not an improvement. So that's what I wanted to say on that topic.
Well, it's true. It's because even paying attention to how Vince was impressed, at least by how it responded, right? But it's very confident in how it presents itself.
Yeah.
And
but if you do know good from bad, then yes, you can use it to assist you in what you have to do, and it can make your life easier and let you get to the finish line faster and all of those things.
Oh yeah, because I don't know any Python, but I started having conversations with it about Python. It was teaching me all kinds of stuff. It was while helping me accomplish a small task at the same time.
But it's really it's meant to produce an output, a text output, and it's going to do everything it has to do to give you just that, even if that means making stuff up.
Yep.
What's 100 trillion parameters? What is that? Drew Simpson?
Which kind of, Robert, kind of brings me back to, I'd like to say back to Ian Jemisin's point of, this is really interesting. ChatGPT, we're all going to have to learn how to work with these new tools. But I think the real power is harnessing AI to rather, models. What do you call them? LLMs. Sorry, it's really late here. I'm getting tired. But there's a sort of, it's almost a distraction, ChatGPT. It's a good example of how incredible this language stuff can be. But there's a serious side to all this, and we all need to be keeping on top of it, learning it, finding out more, I'd say.
And then he's asked.
I'll post it in the chat, but there's if you guys haven't seen it yet, there's the what is it called? Darren, remind me. It's the podcast by the Context podcast with Chris Hippolyte and Todd Geist, and it's
they're talking, they're talking about how they use the AI. Chris is really well ahead of the curve in a lot of this work he's doing, even outside of FileMaker. But as you said, Eric, you're using it to learn Python, and I've been using it to learn a bit of JavaScript as well. One of the analogies I bring it back to is we used to have a website from Brian Dunning which had all the custom functions. Now, for a good amount of time in my learning days, I would take the custom function as it stood and put it straight into my solutions without really knowing the recursiveness and how productive it was and performant, and just accept it. And if I got the result out that I wanted, then I would just take it as it was. There's going to be some code coming out of ChatGPT or GitHub's Copilot to say, here's some code to do the function you want to do. And there's going to be a lot of us just accepting what it is and running with it. But like Vin said, you've got to know the answer to know what it comes back with as to whether it's good or not. It's going to speed up our coding when we know what we're doing. But that link there is a really good thing just to watch two people in our community and how they've applied AI to what they're doing. And we do need to be on top of it. We need to understand it. And just for the record, I was being facetious when I said ChatGPT 3.5 was sitting next to 4. That is not my understanding of the technology. Yes.
I presume that, Darren.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if there was an
just clearing it up in case anyone wasn't,
Yeah.
I'll just put that back into ChatGPT and have it checked.
Yeah. Are you sitting next to ChatGPT 4? 4 will say yes. 3.5 will say no, not at all.
I've had really good experiences with using Copilot and ChatGPT for coding, often in languages I'm less familiar with. It helped me build a whole Rust project, a couple recently, and that's a really new language to me. Shell scripting is not my forte, but I feel so much more confident doing any type of shell scripting, whether it's in PowerShell on a Windows environment or on Mac. And it's just like a really empowering tool, especially for things where I feel more like a beginner. I think there's this notion, and it's very true, that the experts are going to wield this the best because they're going to be able to spot when it's wrong and right. But even people who are new to, a paradigm or a new language or whatever are going to benefit enormously from it too. And we'll probably end up producing a lot of garbage code. I would argue a lot of places are already doing that, myself included. Sometimes you just need to get stuff done. Tools like this are going to just massively accelerate our output because sometimes often good enough is good enough. If it's 80% as fast as it needs to be or whatever, sometimes it's good enough just to get something out the door. And then, down the road, you can, if you need to refactor something, if there's a bottleneck, if there's something that needs to be improved, if using, destructuring in your JavaScript is slowing it down by creating too many objects, all that stuff can be revisited later, but you're going to have a product done, whereas you might not have been able to have the resource to do that before. So it's pretty mind-blowing, just the stuff I've seen it come up with. And a lot of times I feel like I'm sort of the student to it, showing me, even in languages I am somewhat familiar with, new ways of doing it. Like, how do you deduplicate an array in JavaScript, for example? And it uses like, a set, and then it like converts that to an array, and it uses the rest operator to destructure it and copy it over to it's like all this. I'm like, wow, that's something I wouldn't have learned until a couple years in. So the phrase I use, and it's not really a flattering word for a human, but when I was working on a couple Rust projects recently, it would do something, and I would kind of glance at it, and it would be correct, and I would be surprised that it's correct, and it trains you to trust it after a while because it is correct a lot of the time. And I just sort of,
Especially in coding, yes.
yeah, definitely. I would say that's really the main place I've used it at all. But I sort of turned into like a meat, like just like a tab pressing meat robot after a while. Just, yep, that's right too. Yep, accept, accept, accept. And it was doing my whole project for me. So I can absolutely envision a future where you sort of give it just a broad summary of what you're trying to do, and it really can hammer out most of the implementation details. Doesn't seem that far-fetched. And also in terms of like being able to recognize correctness, a lot of times you'll write the function name, and then it will not only write the code for the function, but it will autocomplete all the tests that you're going to need for that function. It'll think of edge cases you didn't think of. So in terms of us having to be the experts, it's making me even better at testing too. It's like a superpower. I feel like I'm wearing a bionic suit with these things. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, remember the days when you would go to school and you had a math test and you were not allowed to bring the calculator
Oh
to the
man.
test, right? I remember those days. And then in high school they said you could bring your calculator, but you can't have one of those calculators with the memory thing. They have to press a button on the back and zap the memory or something. So you could now bring calculators to class, you know?
Mhm.
Definitely see a day where all these software platforms have this augmented superpower, like as you say, Josh.
I heard a kind
Yep.
of hopeful story from, I think they were like an engineering manager or something at another company, and it was on another podcast, I forget which, but um, they actually think that it could lead to companies feeling more confident in hiring young and new engineers because they can trust more that they'll actually be a good investment for their company because they'll be more capable, even if they don't have as many years of training. And yeah, I think knowing that they have this sort of pair programmer or co-pilot along for the ride that can accelerate their learning, um, I think it just, yeah, I would feel more confident hiring new people because I could expect to actually get quite a bit of product out of them. So that's kind of another cool element too. I don't know that it's going to replace people. I think it might even empower people to hire more developers.
There's Gary Kasparov, the chess master, right? I guess everyone knows. And I think he was the first one really beaten by a computer, and wasn't he the first? It was the big competition. And I've seen him talking live, and he's a great. He does public speaking, and I've got some of his books back there. Kind of a Gary Kasparov fan, like chess. And what he said is, after the initial sort of shock of being beaten by the computer and realizing computers are better at chess than humans, which is what happened. And but then he was one of the first people to realize what the next stage is pair chess playing. He initiated it where you had a team, a human and a computer playing another human with a computer. And that got really interesting. And that's what he said was the future, or in chess, there's like that's how it goes. And so that feels, I liked your bionic suit reference, Josh. That's where we're going. Hopefully, is like you're going to be. It's you and this amazing assistant. These amazing assistants is going to make everyone more powerful and more productive and do better coding. Hopefully, I'm gonna say goodbye. Vince, do you
Yes.
need me for anything else on Berlin? Any more Berlin comments? We'll do it next time.
No. I'm also gonna wrap it up here. It's too late for me. And I think it's a great place to stop. Also because it's late for yourself, for myself, for others who are remote. And I think, we've got pretty much covered a lot of material anyway. And there's always more to talk about. So really grateful for all your participation. And Eric, I don't mean to cut it short, but I need
Oh,
to
no, it's
go.
fine.
If you
No,
wanna-
it makes sense. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, people can go check things out here. There's files to download, and if there's anything anybody's interested in hearing from, or anybody they're interested in hearing from, you can always contact us, and we can see if we can recruit them to speak here at DIGFM.
Yeah, so we did reach out to Charles, and he's agreed to come and talk. We're just trying to figure out a date when he'll come. I definitely encourage you to participate in that one, because Charles has a great topic, and if he's going to do that topic, it's well worth it. We might try and get Ian to come and speak as well. So anyway, there's lots of stuff that we're looking to do. So fun
It was.
times.
Yeah. And then next month we should have Matt Navarre, I believe, and I think we're going to do a FileMaker feature fight. I think he's going to demo something that he has in addition to the fight. So,
Look forward to it in the middle of the summer. All right,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Steve. Is it still here?